things I ask in a lot of my classes is, do you believe everything happens for a reason? I'd say probably 90% of the people raise their hands. And then I say, even if it's something you don't like, and then we drop about half. And what I realize is that all of these things are happening for a reason, but typically we don't understand the reason in the moment that it's happening. And that's the frustration, is we're our society is this, we want this instant manifestation, this awareness right now, we want it yesterday kind of idea, and we don't recognize that there are things that are happening today that 20 years down the road will affect your life. I mean, the experience that I usually share with people is that when I was 18, I ended up pregnant, and we all know how that happened. But I ended up in a relationship with a man who was an alcoholic. He was a musician. He didn't work, and then there I was, pregnant, and realizing that this was going to be my life. And I thought, I'm an intelligent, even at 18 years old, I knew that couldn't be my truth, that couldn't be my limitation. And yet I had no money. I was working 3 jobs. I didn't know how I was going to raise a child because that was not part of my plan. And yet I knew that there was something greater within me that could expand. And so I went through a very difficult 2 years. I lived in a shack. I didn't have food. I survived on food stamps. I had very limited material things. And I was extremely depressed and angry and frustrated. And then this book, You Can Heal Your Life, which many people have heard of, read, millions, fell into my lap. And I read it, and it told me that you were responsible for where you were. And I'm like, oh, that's not true. No way. He's responsible because he's the drinker. They're responsible because they're this, And so I read it the first time, and then I read it again, and I was like, oh, well, wait a minute, because if I'm responsible for it, then I could change it, and I don't need all of these people to change it for me. And so when that happened, everything started to change. And so I really believe that, there's life experiences that we have that are to serve a greater purpose that we do not understand until that awareness comes to be. And that's not always in the moment that it's happening. And if we can trust that it is happening for a reason, that is for our soul's growth or our evolution, and we can be in that place of trust, then we don't go into all the fear base. And that's what I've learned in my life, that I've been into the fear, and I realize that it's such wasted energy. That if people really believe that, and if you say you believe it, but you don't trust it, then you really don't believe it. It's something that sounds good. Right. Or we believe it when things are good, right. So we got to believe it in a whole, because the times that are the most difficult typically are the ones that we have the most progression in, where we evolve the most. It doesn't have to be that way, but it tends to be that way. Do we get this, put on the world nightly news? The vibration of the planet right now is just fear-based. And unfortunately, that's just because that's what we've been taught. And normally the way that I explain it is, I ask people to look at an experience where they've been excited, and to tell me what the feelings are behind that experience, physical feelings. So a lot of times they'll say, my hands are sweaty, my heart's racing, I feel butterflies in my stomach. And then I'll say, now I want you to describe to me what fear feels like. And they'll say, my hands are sweaty, I feel a pit in my stomach, my heart's beating really fast. The same physical experiences. And so it's normally just our attachment to it. It's that we've been taught, and they've been taught, and they've been taught all the way down to be fearful. And if we just looked at it, that the possibility is that it isn't fear, and it's really excitement for change, excitement for growth, excitement for something new, and we shift that in our mind, and we start looking at things through excited eyes versus fear-based eyes, because we're going to have the same physical feeling, but it's really just our perception and the way we choose to look at it. And that changes the entire experience, I believe. A story that I share actually in the talk that I give is about my own physical body, and what happened when I was so fear-based with response to being pregnant, not wanting to at that time have a child at 18 years old, and not knowing how to do it, how to support it, how to take care of one, and the anger that came about. And what happened for me was my body literally became toxic. And I had infection oozing out of my entire body, and it was based on all of these emotions that I'd held for so long. So oftentimes that fear manifests as all different sorts of disease, cancers, immune deficiency diseases, weight issues, skin issues. Fear just, it goes into our body, and if there's an emotional issue that we haven't dealt with, that fear makes it grow. And if we don't deal with it, it's got to go somewhere. So it sits in our body somewhere, and then it starts to grow outward, and that will manifest on some level physically. Now, sometimes it's in our physical lives, but eventually it goes into our physical body, because that's where most people pay attention. Is once our body doesn't work, then we go, oh, maybe I ought to pay attention now, where our relationships cannot work, and we'll just blame it on the relationship. Our job cannot work, we'll blame it on our job. Our spiritual aspect won't work, we'll go find a new one, or a new religion. But when our body breaks down, we have one.
Right.
And so then we'll go, oh, maybe there's something to this. And oftentimes the kind of unspoken agreement between a person and their medical person is, I'll pretend to get you better if you'll pretend to, care about yourself, so to speak. And what's happening now is I think people are realizing that we have a part in this. And if we start to change our mind about the way things are, and we start to do the emotional work, the physical manifestations start to dissipate and then transmute. It's really been an interesting shift. And what I find is that when I first started teaching You Can Heal Your Life classes, which was my way of giving back to the information that I found that just literally flipped my life, 360 degrees. Or maybe that's 180 degrees. I'm not sure which way it is, but it flipped it around. And so I started teaching these classes to help people and hope that they could find that within themselves. And at the beginning, there was just so much resistance towards the fact that we would manifest illness. Mm-hmm. And now it's almost a common thought among people that even are just a little bit on the open-minded or a little bit on the metaphysical edge, because people are starting to see that mind-body connection, and there's little bits of this that are traveling into mainstream and into, there's medical doctors that are now doing some natural therapies and Chinese health, what's my word? Acupuncture is much more common, and medical insurance companies are paying for things like that, and massage, and I remember 20 years ago where chiropractic they were wax, they were like, oh my gosh, you're going to a chiropractor? And now they're, common. And so I really think that as we evolve, like Reiki practitioners and things like that will be like chiropractors were 20 years ago. It's just going to be a practice that I think is going to develop. In Russia, you go to Reiki clinics for healing. Mm-hmm. And so that it's coming that direction. But there's been a lot of change that I think is good, because people are owning their responsibility in this. It isn't just this happened to me. I was the 10th in line, I got cancer. Mm-hmm. Instead it's, okay, my emotions, because I didn't deal with the resentment I had with my mother, have manifested this in my life, and I'm going to heal this, and then this in turn will heal.